Hello and welcome to India's World. China's first major dam at Zangmu on the middle reaches of the Yarlung Tsangpo in Tibet, known to us as the Brahmaputra River, went into operation on Sunday, November 23rd. The Zangmu Dam is a 510 megawatt project. This marks the beginning of a new era in Chinese engineering and construction capability in the region. China has immediate plans for 3 more dams on the Yarlung Tsangpo. A 640 megawatt dam will be built at Dagu, which lies 18 km upstream of Zangmu. Another 320 megawatt dam will be built at Jiacha, also on the middle reaches of the Brahmaputra, downstream of the Zangmu. A third dam will be built at Jishu, 11 kilometers upstream of Zangmu. The capacity of the Jishu dam is as yet unconfirmed. China has assured India that the dams are run-of-the-river projects for generating power and will not divert the river's waters. To discuss the implications of China's dam construction on the upper reaches of the Brahmaputra, we have with us 3 distinguished experts. We have with us Ambassador T.C. Rangachari. He has served as India's ambassador to Algeria, Germany, France, and in other capacities in China, Pakistan, and at the UN in New York. He was in charge of the China desk in the Ministry of External Affairs. He is currently a distinguished fellow at a think tank, Vivekananda International Foundation. We have with us Professor Srikanth Kondapalli, one of our foremost China experts. He's professor in Chinese Studies at Center for East Asian Studies, Jawaharlal Nehru University, New Delhi. And we are very lucky to have with us Mr. Ramaswamy Iyer. Without doubt, India's best expert on water resources. He was Secretary of Water Resources and formulated India's first national water policy in 1987. He is currently an honorary research professor at Center for Policy Research in New Delhi. I welcome all of you to this discussion. Ranga, let me begin with you. What is the significance of commissioning of the Zangmu hydroelectric project on the Brahmaputra in Tibet? What does it mean for India?
Well, let's come to India a little later. Insofar as China is concerned, they have very ambitious plans for generating electricity in the course of the next 5 years or so. Currently, they are at something around 170 gigawatts, and they want to go up to about 220 gigawatts in the next 5 years. And for some time now, I think for nearly 20 years now, there has been discussion in the Chinese official establishment that in Tibet there is a great potential for hydroelectric power generation, and that should be exploited in order to augment China's capabilities, also insofar as the requirements of power in Tibet is concerned. Because according to the official Chinese sources, while the consumption of power in Tibet, it's just about 1/3 of the national average. If you look at the economy, or rather the natural resources in Tibet, it is estimated variously as something like 1 trillion by the Chinese. And in order to extract those resources, particularly minerals and so on, you need power. So, as part of this entire process of trying to generate more power for the country at large, for Tibet region development and so on, it was perhaps inevitable that these kinds of projects would come up. Insofar as India is concerned, I think we have to look at 2 issues. One is whether insofar as power generation is concerned, is there any possibility at all that there could be any surplus power which India could buy? That would be on the positive side. And on the minus side, how does it affect insofar as the water flows are concerned?
Okay.
Maybe...
So let me take this question about India's knowledge of what's happening on the energy development scene in Tibet on the Brahmaputra. Let me ask you this. Government of India had set up an interministerial group, expert group on the Brahmaputra. And it submitted its 9th report last year, which said that besides these 4 projects, there are several other projects on the Brahmaputra at Lengda, Zongda, Langchen, at Nangxian. And they say that they have discerned this from the ground activity, road building activity, bridge building activity in these areas. Now, I find it very odd that they discerned this. Does it mean that we have no official exchange of information with China on the hydroelectric activity they've planned on the Brahmaputra? How do we figure out what they're doing?
I think the Sunday's announcement about the dam construction initiation process indicates a transition from denial mode to display mode of the Chinese plans on Yarlung Tsangpo and downstream. This reflects that what the Chinese have stated before is actually not true. For example, a decade ago, China's water resource minister, speaking in Dhaka in Bangladesh, denied that there is any dam construction activity going on across the Yarlung Zampo. We did come across several reports that they are building 24 dams in all at the Great Bend.
Secondary information.
Satellite pictures as well.
Okay.
Sinha has also from time to time been carrying reports about the discussions about developing and construction of dams in Tibet.
Indeed, the Water Resource Ministry of China in its website has a bilingual Chinese and English language white papers, not white papers exactly, but full-fledged reports about the catchment areas of all the 16 odd rivers that China has and the kind of construction that they are planning to do for the next 50 years. And by 2050, these 24 projects are supposed to be completed on the Yarlung Zampo. And some of these projects are pretty huge, humongous, each one costing 250 to 300 billion yuan. That's roughly about 80 to 90 billion dollars of investment by the time the 3 stages of construction that they have identified in the papers of the Water Resource Ministry in China. Number one, it has huge capital outlays. Number two, it has huge hydroelectricity power generation capacity. Number three, 20 to 30,000 workers and engineers. That's a huge...
So what you're saying is that it's all in the public domain?
That's right.
Okay.
Before you move on, maybe you should also mention the project in Mutho.
Indeed. Some of the projects, for example, at Mutho, they are building a project which is 48,000 megawatt project.
We're going to discuss it. That's at the Great Bend. Mr. Iyer, is China committed under international law to take into account the concerns of India as a lower riparian? And does the absence of water sharing agreement with China limit India's ability to monitor Chinese projects and their impact on the flows of the Brahmaputra?
Well, there is this UN convention on the non-navigational use of international water courses.
China hasn't signed it, I thought.
They voted against it.
Yes.
1997. It has just come into effect. I think the required number of countries have ratified it. It is now international law. Yeah. But India had abstained and China had voted against this. So to what extent this binds China and India, I don't know. Even if you abstain, once it is international law, courts will take that into account. In fact, the International Court of Justice at The Hague cited this convention extensively in a case between Hungary and Slovakia. So that is basically what it says, it talks about equitable utilization. That is what...
But doesn't exist on the ground for China and India as of now.
If you go to law, we go to The Hague, we will have to quote this.
Okay.
And it means in prior information, advanced information about intervention to intervene, taking your concerns into account, okay, and not doing any harm to you. These are the basic principles of international law.
All right, thank you.
But whether China will abide by this, whether China will worry about it, one doesn't know.
Okay. We need to take a break at this point. We'll be back again in a bit with this interesting discussion. Don't go away. Welcome back. We are discussing China's dam building activity on the Brahmaputra. Mr. Srikanth Kondapalli, you wanted to say something before I went on a break.
Burundi, Turkey and China were the ones who have had a negative view about the international law on water navigational purposes. China's role reflects to that of what in 1890s the Harmon Doctrine has been suggested, which is the sovereignty of not just the waters which are passing through, but also underground water resources are part of the sovereign wealth of that country.
There's been a lot of development in international law since then.
This has been discredited with the 1997 law.
Anyway, we'll leave that aside for a minute. What I wanted to ask you was, I'd like you to go back to your earlier point. You wanted to talk about the big dam on the Great Bend, where the Brahmaputra, while it flows, earlier on it flows towards the east at the Great Bend, it turns towards India. in the opposite direction. Now that the Yarlung Sangpo Canyon, is there a plan to build a huge dam of 48,000 megawatt capacity, more than twice the capacity of the Three Gorges Dam? Or should we say they've given it up because that area has been declared now a national reserve?
Well, the plan of the Water Resource Ministry in China indicates that this project will be completed by 2050. And they have identified the areas where they are going to build up the dams, and some satellite pictures also have indicated the construction activity going on as of now. Now, at Mutho, there is a 48,000 megawatt project, which is the largest humankind had ever seen. And at Tatu Chiao, they have a 32,000 megawatt project, which is again a huge project, bigger than the Three Gorges project.
So the Great Bend project is on. That's what you're saying. Okay. Mr. Iyer, would it be correct to say that the downstream volumes of water in the Brahmaputra may not be affected by the construction of dams in the midstream area, because a substantial recharge of the Brahmaputra takes place after the Great Bend and once it enters India?
Well, the total water available in the Brahmaputra is, many people say, that only 30% of it comes from Tibet. That 70% is generated after it crosses the border because of precipitation within India. But this doesn't mean that we can ignore that 30%. 30% is a fairly sizable quantity, and also this is during the rainy season. In the lean season, these proportions change. Yeah. We are much more dependent on flows from upstream in the lean season than we are in the flush season. So this is not a great argument. You know, people say it doesn't matter what China does because that's only 30%, the rest of it is here. This is not true. And apart from that, any interference with the river has multiple implications, not only a question of diversion of waters, it has many other ecological impacts. It affects the river regime, it affects the river morphology, it affects the chemistry, the properties of the river, temperature stratification, all kinds of things. So the harmful effects of intervention go far beyond mere diversion of flows. So this is something, even if it's only 30%, and even if they do not build diversion projects, it can still have considerable effects on downstream countries.
And we in India are aware of these consequences?
We are well aware, we're studying it all the time. But as far as China is concerned, if I remember right, water did not figure in the India-China talks until about 5 or 6 years ago. Then it started, or maybe a little 10 years ago. Then it started, and essentially because we had no information. China kept denying that it was doing anything at all. Then we saw some satellite pictures and we confronted them with these images. And they said, yes, we are building something, but these are run-of-the-river projects, no, not diversion projects.
TCH, China is also building smaller hydro projects on the Yarlung Sangpo's tributaries, and this is official. And they say that it will have no impact downstream, just as they say that on the main Yarlung Sangpo river dams, they would have no downstream impact because they run of the river. But how do we know all this unless they share data with us both before the dams were constructed and after the construction of the dams?
You're absolutely right. See, till we had that flash floods in Himachal Pradesh about 15 years ago, this discussion was not taking place with the Chinese. What happened after the flash floods in 2000 was that we agreed that there would be data sharing. But that data sharing also is mainly from the point of view of flood prevention. Yeah. We have to go beyond that. Ideally, the kind of regime that one should be looking for, which is unlikely perhaps in the immediate short term, is the kind of thing which the Europeans have done with the Danube Authority, which predates the convention, UN convention, although now that's also been submitted to the United Nations. It's open for all countries to become states party to. So if we could all sit down together, the concerned countries, the upper and lower riparian, and talk about what it is the quantum of flow is, what is it that each national plan is conceiving, what it is that, when is it they're going to start construction, how is it going to be. Yeah. If all this can be discussed, then possibly you could arrive at a solution which will address the problem that you are speaking of.
Currently, that's not happening.
Not only currently, I would say in the near term, it's probably unlikely that this would come about.
May I say something on this? Now, see, India is, in relation to China, India is in the same position as Pakistan is in relation to India on the Indus. Now, there is this Indus Waters Treaty under which we have assumed certain obligations of advancement. 6 months prior to any construction, we must give them the complete DPR, the details, engineering, drawing, designs, everything, down to the smallest
So
detail.
would you mind if we discuss that slightly later? Because I want to carry on this point further. Professor Kondapalli, does China as an upper riparian have a hydrological advantage over all the lower riparian countries? Because there are no rivers that flow into China. Most of the rivers are flowing out. And so is China currently under any international obligation at all to do what it pleases with the river, or not do anything that affects the lower riparians?
Well, as a responsible country in the international system, as the second largest economy, China has to abide by the international law, the 1997 treaty.
But then why is it,
Having said
does
that,
it have any, it has 10 major rivers flowing out to 11 different countries. As far as I know, there is not a single agreement on water sharing.
except on Mekong Commission.
Mekong Commission, they're not members of the Mekong
Exactly.
Commission, they have dialogue partners.
Exactly.
So
And
here is a country that has only MOUs and cooperative agreements, but no transboundary river sharing agreement with any country.
Indeed.
And you say that they actually need to follow international law. They haven't up to now.
Yes, the Kazakhs have been complaining about the Irtysh River being blocked by China with the water levels being. Sunghua River with Russia became a controversy in 2005 when chemicals were released in that and several hundred people were killed on the Russian side. It became a diplomatic row between Russia and China at that time. With the Mitson Dam in Myanmar, where they are building a 306
Mitsone
meter.
Dam has been stopped by
It's been stopped. So what I was trying to suggest is, with all lower riparian states, there is some problem or the other brewing up, and China had not catered for it as of now.
And
China
it's still
actually,
not catering for it.
China actually has a unilateral position on the river water
Because of the hydrological dominance it enjoys.
Indeed.
Okay. We need to take a break at this point again. We'll be back in a bit. Don't go away. This is an interesting discussion. Be with us. Welcome back. We are discussing hydro diplomacy, really, about China's activities on the Brahmaputra impacting India. Mr. Iyer, you wanted to say
3
something?
years ago, there was an official statement from China on this. They said they are not planning any big diversion from Brahmaputra. They gave 3 reasons. One was that it is a very highly complex, difficult, technologically difficult undertaking, an enormous, daunting task, and they are not fools to undertake such rash adventures. This is number one. Number two, it's hugely costly, it involves heavy investments, and it has very major environmental impacts and implications, so they will take care. The third was interesting. The third was that they, as a responsible country, they take seriously international relations, relations with other states. So these were the 3 reasons they gave for not proceeding with diversion projects. And interestingly, at a conference in Delhi, which took place around about the same time, the academics, Chinese academics, added a 4th reason. They said, we don't need this water. They said, China has been practicing water economies. We have brought down our consumption of water, that we do not need this kind of major diversion.
Let's discuss this a bit further. Ranga, China's water resources are disproportionately distributed. Most of the water resources are in the south. North and the west are water stressed. So how important does it make Tibet hydrologically for hydrological security of China?
Well, you see, the areas which are, in that sense, water deprived, you might say. In fact, Tibet is not water deprived. It
No,
has got
Tibet
no
has excess water. I'm saying
correct. But
in
the,
the north and the
population,
west.
the population distribution is also in that sense skewed, because all of these places, all the provinces like Ningxia or the Gansu and Tibet and all these bordering provinces, these are all provinces which don't have much by way of population.
So
Tibet,
disproportionate
yes,
can be in terms of water resources as
Yes.
well as utilization. No?
True. But, to go back to the point that Mr. Iyer was just making, the money constraint doesn't operate now because the Chinese are sitting on a huge, $3 trillion plus cash reserve. Number two, as far as technical expertise is concerned, Srikanth was just mentioning the numbers, and then you look at the engineering project with the railways. And number three, this project itself, this Changmu that we are talking about just now, is constructed at the height of about 3,300 meters, which is about 10,000 feet. So, you know, I think probably these are all technically feasible, financially feasible. Ultimately, the bottom line is unilateralism. Chinese decide that we are going to do it. Is there going to be any rider, any constraint on that decision making? Secondly, when they say we'll take into account the interests or concerns of our neighbors, that again is unilateral. Because the extent to which they do take into account and factor that in their plans, in their execution, etc., is for the Chinese to decide. So there is no mechanism which is an independent mechanism, like
multilateral
we were talking
or bilateral,
about the multilateral or bilateral, like we were speaking earlier, which would be a constraint.
Okay. You wanted to say something about the disproportionate distribution of water resources, and that is why they had earlier talked of diverting water, and they said there would be a eastern route, a middle route, and the western route. The western route concerned India because western route was taking water from the Yarlung Sangpo or Brahmaputra up north.
Tibet has roughly about 25% of water passing into China through Yangtze River and Yellow River, and Yarlung Zampo into South Asia and so on. Then you have the huge projects that China, as you mentioned, the Eastern project, the Central project, and the Southwestern project of diversion of water. The total diversion is about 45 billion cubic meters of water.
But
in
has
all
it been
these
given
three
up
projects.
completely?
These have, according to the Water Resource Ministry, these are on. All these projects are on. In fact, the Eastern project has been completed just before the Beijing Olympics, so that water is supplied to Beijing city for the Olympics season. It also supplies water to Tianjin. And then there is the Central project, which is supposed to transfer something like 14.3 billion cubic meters of water. And the Western project, which is what impacts India, is about nearly 20 billion cubic meters of water they plan to. And they are building 700 kilometers of tunnels through explosions. It could be nuclear explosions or otherwise of these. And some of the projects closer to India are 50-kilometer long tunnels. So these have huge environmental impact. I also wanted to say that in my interactions with the Chinese on this issue, they are putting up conditions now. They are saying if India or any lower riparian state uses water for only agricultural purposes, then they are willing to have an understanding on with the lower riparian states. We have two MOUs before, about 6 years ago, on the water issue, and during Vice President's visit in June this year, June 28th, we had another MOU for China is now charging India for the water level measurements during the flood season. So I think they are also putting conditions. Now, between India and China, the Chinese are charging, and these are $20,000, $30,000 per visits to those sites. So it indicates that China actually is putting conditions on low riparian.
Mr. Iyer, so we are back to unilateralism. China is energy deficient and it needs food sufficiency. So it needs to generate hydroelectric power because it's the cleanest form, and it needs to divert water for food sufficiency. So would the pursuit of these two goals not make it more and more unilateral? Why should it listen to anybody else?
Well, I don't see why. They are the upper appearance, they are the upper hand. And unless they want to for political reasons, it is not international law which is going to compel China. But if they feel that they need good relations, then they may, as I said, if political reasons may persuade China to take concerns into account, other countries' concerns into account. But you said hydroelectric power is clean. It's not. It is one of the worst forms of human intervention in nature. It has got, I won't go into
cleaner than
detail.
coal and
but I must tell you that this whole claim that hydroelectric power is clean is totally untrue. But apart from that, China needs, it's not only energy, it's also water. As was pointed out, the north and the west of China are without any water.
But that's where they want to grow food.
all the water has to come from the south. So diversions
Yeah.
are likely to happen.
Okay.
And there is a vast literature. If you go back, it may not be official, it may be academic, but they have been talking about diversions for a long time. And so they may say this is not an official statement. but
Okay,
the
we're running out of
intention
time. I just have one more question, and that is to Ranga. But now, if in India we can fret and fume about what China is doing as an upper riparian, but what moral right do we have to say all that when we've not been able to sign any successful, except for Indus Treaty and the Ganga Water Treaty with Bangladesh? We don't have successful water sharing treaties in our neighborhood. Look at what we've done to Teesta.
I don't think it's a moral question, really. I think it's a question of what the requirements of the upper riparian is, what is the requirement of the lower riparian. It is perfectly possible that this can be discussed in a structured way, because ultimately
Why only discuss? Why not manage? Why don't you have basin management?
That's
You
the
have,
next
you
step.
have the Nile Basin
No, that's
Management
the next-
Authority, you have the Limpopo River Basin Authority, you have the Mekong River Commission.
No, that
Why
is
can't
the-
we have
no.
river commissions? Which
That will follow. See, first of all, you have to discuss, be on the same page in regard to the flows, the requirement, the constraints, etc. Then only you can move to the question of management. So I'm only looking at it sequentially. But there is no reason why all the countries involved, upper riparian, lower riparian, cannot sit down and talk. You see, even with the Bangladeshis, we have a continuous dialogue on this. There is a mechanism within the Indus Waters Treaty for continuous dialogue with Pakistan. We agree, we don't agree, that's a different matter. But as far as factual information is concerned, that's available to everybody. And what we are doing on the Indian side, to the extent to which it affects the lower riparians, they are made aware of it. In this case, the lower riparians, whether it is Brahmaputra or Mekong or any of the other rivers, are not really aware of what the Chinese are doing.
point well made. We've really run out of time. I would like to thank all my guests, Mr. Ramaswamy Iyer, Professor Srikanth Kondapalli, Ambassador T.C. Rangachari. Thank you very much for coming here and participating in this discussion. That's all we have for you today. We'll be back again next week, of course. Till then, goodbye, and thanks for watching.